Good afternoon, friends. I am Dr. Arun Sharma, and I'm going to take this session on statistical aspect of protocol writing. Just please confirm first whether I'm audible. You can respond by writing on the questions. You have a questions box. In that, just respond. You may say yes if I'm audible. Okay, thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, Priya. Thank you for informing. I got it that I am audible. I'm not visible. Okay, you want to see me. Right, I'll do that. Let me see if the video starts. I guess I'm visible now, though a bit dark because the lighting is not appropriate in this room. Still, you can. So a few house rules that it's going to, since it is an online mode and direct interaction is not possible, but we have two options available here. On your screen, you can see that there may be a hand. A hand may be visible on your screen. You are already using it since last 3 days, you must be knowing. And if you want to ask a question or if you want to clarify something, you raise your hand, I'll be able to see it. And then either I will unmute you, and once I unmute you, you will be able to speak. That is one way. And the second method is you can write your question in your question box. I am keeping it on. My question box is on, and I'm able to see you on the. Will be able to see your question on the question box, and I'll answer that. And if it requires any discussion, then again I will unmute you, and with that, after unmuting, we'll be able to talk to me, and it will be audible to every other participant in the seminar. So what I can see, there are 72 attendees. I don't know how many are supposed to attend, but since it's already 2:05, I think we can start. Right, so your entire protocol writing workshop is over. We are into the final phase, rather an extended phase as per the timeline. And we are going to talk about one important issue, and that is what to write or how to present your one component, that is how to write about the sample size and what to write in the statistical analysis section. Right, that is the requirement. So let me pull up a few slides that will be very useful. Just a second, give me a moment. Okay, so I guess screen is visible to you. Can you see the PPT on the screen? One of you, if you please confirm. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shikhar. Okay, so we are going to talk about how to present or how to write about your, how do you write about your sample size estimation and statistical part of the protocol writing. So as most of us are engaged in a quantitative research. Quantitative research means that the research question that you are asking in your thesis or the objectives of the research that you have defined needs to be answered using data. The data will be the backbone of answering the research question or meeting the objectives of your thesis that you are going to do. In majority of the cases, this is what happens. So when it is collecting information from your patients or from your subjects, then it's a very important factor that how many subjects should you choose? How many people should be included? How many research subjects should be included in your protocol so that the answer that you give on the basis of your research carries power, evidence sufficient enough to be accepted as a valid answer to the research question that you are trying to answer. Right. So that is why the number of persons that should be involved, that should either be interviewed or should be examined or given the intervention, depending on the nature of research you are doing, that number is a very crucial phenomenon if you are doing quantitative research. So in that, size calculation, let us first understand that. So the first condition is, if it is a study where quantitative analysis is to be carried out. When I say quantitative analysis, that means that there is another option where you can do a qualitative analysis also. So what is the difference between a quantitative analysis and qualitative analysis? In a given scenario, if asking questions to a small number of people can interrogating or interviewing or examining a small number of people can give you answer to your research question, that usually is called a qualitative analysis. But when you want to generate larger number of people to be included, when so arbitrarily, when the number is large of the people who are being interviewed or who are being examined, then that's called a quantitative analysis. For example, if you want to understand that COVID-19 as an infectious disease, what are the risk factors present? So in the earlier stage, if you remember, when the disease was first identified in Wuhan and cases were reported from a seafood market, a wet market, and those patients started developing pneumonia and could not be saved. What would have been the first method of actually finding out what the disease is like? Doing a detailed analysis of information available from those 5, 7, or 10 patients who first reported the disease in Wuhan. So that was a qualitative analysis, because in the last week of December or up to 15th January, the number of patients available were extremely low, hardly 5, 10, 15, or 20 patients from whom you wanted to gather why did they get the disease, what is the clinical profile of the disease, what is the prognosis of the disease, what are the pathological changes taking place. And there was no way to study 200 patients or 500 patients or 1000 patients at that time. So that research that was done in the early stages to understand the characteristic of SARS-CoV-2 virus and the COVID-19 infection was a qualitative research. And they need not have waited, okay, the number of patients available is not sufficient if we start calculating a sample size, so we will not do the research till the adequate number of patients are available. That's not the case. Especially in a situation which is life-threatening, which is likely to threaten the entire fabric of a community, then you cannot wait for a systematic research to be done after calculating the sample size and compiling that many patients. That research is known as the qualitative research. But today, when we have in our own country itself, we have more than 3 million or 3.5 million cases, then you have enough number of patients to decide on a sample size based analysis also that will become quantitative. And obviously, it is not possible to do a research on 3.5 million patients. That's impractical for any person anywhere in a single size. Okay, that is the purpose of having a defined sample size in a quantitative research. Okay, so what are the situations, in what scenarios do you need to calculate a sample size if you are doing a thesis on what areas? So if you recall your understanding or your education in epidemiology, and if you remember some pages from the chapter of epidemiology in the textbook of Park, which I am sure you all must have read, barring one or two, the studies, the epidemiological studies are classified as descriptive studies, analytical studies, and experimental studies. So the descriptive studies are those which help you understand the magnitude of the problem, and we express that magnitude in terms of incidence of the disease, prevalence of the disease, or now we use another term called burden estimation, disease burden estimation by parameters like disability adjusted life years, or DALY as we commonly know. So if you want to calculate the incidence of a disease, if you want to calculate the prevalence of a disease, Or for that matter, today, if you want to know what is the case fatality rate from COVID-19, what is the proportion of patients who are symptomatic, what proportion of patients require ventilation support, what proportion of patients require positive pressure breathing, etc. These questions are descriptive in nature. In order to answer that, if you are doing a descriptive study, you need to calculate a sample size. Then the second group of studies are analytical studies. Analytical studies, you are familiar with the names. Most likely, if you are working in a hospital setup and you are going to do your research in a clinical subject, you are likely to conduct a case control study or a cohort study. So in both type of studies, you must have already become familiar with them during your last 3 days of protocol writing workshop, that what is a case control study and what is a cohort study. So if you are carrying out any of these, you need to calculate a sample size. And the third is an intervention study, which is the most important and most talked about topic at this moment, because in COVID-19, we are doing extensive research on what medicine works and what medicine does not work, whether it is antiviral or it is the most controversial hydroxychloroquine, or it is the immunomodulation drugs like ivermectin, or it is one of the steroids, whatever it is, or what combination of drugs are going to act. So everything depends on how good or how effectively you have conducted a clinical trial. So these three categories, a descriptive study, an analytical study, and an intervention study, together constitute more than 90% of the quantitative database research that is being carried out on any disease or any health related event. So in all those 90% situations, you need to calculate a sample size. And of the remaining 10%, those who work in diagnostics, for example, in the departments of microbiology or in the department of pathology, who work in diagnostic areas, who develop new screening tools or diagnostic tools, for them, carrying out the validity studies are more important. The validity studies are, if you are developing a screening tool, then you want to know what is the sensitivity and specificity of that screening tool that you are going to use. Or you are developing a diagnostic tool, then it is important to know that what is the positive predictive value and what is the negative predictive value of that particular test. That means in a suspected case, if you apply a test, a diagnostic test, you want to know if the test has come positive, what are the chances that the person whose test has come positive is actually suffering from the disease. That is true positivity, and that is called positive predictive value. And similarly, in a symptomatic person or a suspected case, if my diagnostic test is showing that the result is negative, then what are the chances that the person is actually not suffering from the disease or the negative predictive value? And sometimes when you use a slider scale to determine the cutoff, that whether the cutoff will be at a particular value of my reading or larger than that or smaller than that, on a slider scale, if you want to determine the cutoff value, then you do a receiver operator characteristic curve. So these are the scenarios where you need to calculate a sample size. And if you have to calculate a sample size, then in your protocol, which is a dossier on what research you are going to do in your next 18 or 24 months and how you are going to do, must contain every possible detail so that someone who's reading it understands what you are going to do, how you are going to do, and why, whether all checks and balances are being taken care of or not in that particular scenario. That is where you need to specify the sample size. Okay, is that clear? Now I'll stop there and ask you if you have any question at this particular stage. Please feel free to raise your hand or type your question. I will try to answer that before we proceed. I'll wait for 30 seconds if I see any hand being raised or a question being asked. Otherwise, I'll move on. Okay, Hemant Soni wants to know the ROC curve, details of ROC curve, and Amit Bagel wants to know is a micro student which study suits me. So the first question, if you are a micro student, what really suits you, that does not depend on in which subject you are. Whether you are in microbiology or physiology or medicine or surgery, the study design does not depend on that. The study design depends on what is the research question you are going to ask. So when you decide on a topic, suppose you want to do a study on the the uh, the antibody profile of COVID-19 patients, or you want to say that what is the antibody status among the COVID-19 patients over a period of time. Why I am asking this question? Because there are reports, though not confirmed, which are saying that in some patients, the immunity to COVID-19 does not last beyond 100 days, which is a very remarkable and significant information about COVID-19. If the antibody levels after 90 to 100 days come down to such a level that the person becomes susceptible to COVID-19 again, in that case, will the immunization be ever an important, will that immunization ever be an important, will the immunization ever be able to achieve protection if the immunity level lasts only for 3 months? Please excuse me for a minute. It's an important call. I have to take and I'll get Yeah, sorry for that interruption. So we were talking about this microbiology scenario, and in that COVID-19, if you want to study the immunological profile over a period of a long duration, and you want to see how the immunity status changes in a patient after he has tested positive, say over the next 6 months, then you need a cohort study. In the same scenario, if you want to compare the immunological status of symptomatic patients versus asymptomatic patients, or severely symptomatic patients like SARI and ILI patients with mildly symptomatic patients, then you will have a case control design. Or if you want to see the role of ivermectin in immunological change in immunological profile, then you will do a clinical trial. So it is not subject that will decide your study design. It is the research question that will decide that what kind of study design you are supposed to choose. I hope that explains. Then Vivek wants to know, would a study which aims to find prevalence of some variable in the student population at any institute still need sample size estimation rather than including all students at the institute in this study? Great question. Sample size is required in two scenarios. What is a sample size? What is a sample? A sample is supposed to be representative of an underlying population. Suppose the size of the population is 1 million, 10 lakh people. The study cannot be done on 10 lakh people. You want to study on a smaller number of people, and what study, and these smaller number of people, say from 10 lakh, you are picking up 2000. Those 2000 randomly selected people you will mount your study on. And the results that will come out from these 2000 students, you are going to say on the basis of those 2000, what is the truth about that 1 million people out in the society. So if there are 1 million, 10 lakh hypertensive patients, you choose 2000 hypertensive patients from them, do a study on them, and then say that on the basis of these 2000, I am saying what is the status of these 1 lakh, 10 lakh people who are there in the community. Okay. When the number is too large, unmanageable, you do a sample size study. Now suppose you are being in UCMS and GTB hospital, you want to do a study on the first year postgraduate students who are admitted in this year in the PG program in UCMS and GTB hospital. The number may be 150. Now if you want to say, I'm going to see their smoking behavior in next 3 years, the question is, can you recruit all 150? Do you think that that will be able to study every one of them for a period of 3 years? If yes, if 150 is manageable, you need not calculate the sample size. But if you say that this cohort of first year postgraduate students in UCMS and GTB hospital is a representative of all postgraduate students admitted to all medical colleges in Delhi, then is it a representative sample? Yes or no? If yes, then it is not representing students who have come to other colleges, so it may not be representative, and that number may become 2000. Out of 2000, how many you should take? So if your results are restricted to that college only, you will say that what I am saying about the smoking behavior postgraduate students admitted in any other college, then sample size calculation is not required, because your entire universe is your sample. If your entire universe is 150 students and you can take all the 150 students, there is no need of calculating sample size. If the number of patients are very small, suppose you want to do a study on beta thalassemia. Now, beta thalassemia cases as such in the registry of the thalassemia clinic of the pediatrics department may be hardly 200, and you have access to all the 200 patients, there is no need to calculate a sample size. But to prove a research hypothesis, if the calculated sample size comes out to be 60 and you have 200 patients, then why do 65, why do 100, why do 200? Your work will be done with 60 only. In that case, even out of that 200, you should choose the 60, which is your calculated minimum sample size. I hope that clears your doubt, Vivek. Thank you. Akanksha wants to know, can we do mixed study during our thesis, or should we prefer to do quantitative itself, since we are beginners in the field of research? Right, Akanksha. Of course, you can do both. There is a defined methodology which is called mixed method approach. Mixed method approach means you have one quantitative component and you have a qualitative component. So where you think that only quantitative research will not answer all the questions, or only qualitative research will not answer your research question, in that case you can use both together, and this is called mixed method design. In mixed method design, you will have a separate sample size calculation for the quantitative component of the study and a separate sample size calculation for the qualitative component of the study. Is that clear, Akanksha? I'm waiting for your answer, Akanksha. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So since there are no more questions, I guess we can move ahead. Right. So these are the scenarios where sample size calculation is required. Now, what are the situations where doing a quantitative research and the sample size calculation is not required? These are, it is a pilot study. What is a pilot study? A pilot study is a study where no research has been done in the past and you are the pioneer, you are the first person to do the research on that particular subject. Because you know how sample size is calculated. Sample size is calculated on certain parameters. Let me show that first. Okay, since my today's presentation does not include sample size calculations, I'm not going into that detail. But in order to calculate sample size, we require two informations. What are those information? Number one, suppose you want to do a prevalence study. Then first you have to know what is the reported or known prevalence prior to launching your study. That value will come 5% prevalence, 10% prevalence. Say you want to see what is the prevalence of COPD as a comorbidity or a COPD as a precondition for COVID-19 to become fatal. So you want to compare fatality of COVID-19 patients without COPD versus COVID-19 patient fatality with COPD. COPD, I mean chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, right? Now, there has been no study in the past because it's a new disease, and in India particularly, or in Delhi for that matter, nobody has studied what is the relationship between existing or past history or current status of COPD and COVID-19 mortality. So in order to start this research, since nobody has done in the past, you will call it a pilot study. And in a pilot study, you do not calculate the sample size. You say, we are going to recruit first 50 COPD patients who are admitted with COVID-19 positivity and compare that with age and sex match controls. Control here means COVID-19 without COPD. So it's a pilot study. And in pilot study, we need not calculate a sample size. Second, only descriptive statistics is being presented. You know, on the television, what do we see nowadays? Number of people who have become COVID positive in Delhi, in other states, in India, in Asia, in the world, or in USA and Brazil we compare because they are the front runners in the race. Now they're just quoting a number. So if you, and what is this number? This is a statistic. Total number of positive patients is a statistic. What is our recovery rate? We are reporting recovery rate is 76%. What is mortality rate or case? I will not call it case fatality rate. That's wrong. But still, we are saying okay, the mortality rate is 1.6%. Now, here you are not applying any test of significance. You are not using the so-called p-value anywhere. So here you are just giving the numbers, descriptive numbers. For doing that, you need not calculate a sample size. Okay. And the third scenario where you need not calculate a sample size is when you are declaring, when you are declaring at the beginning of your research that you are going to use a convenience sampling. What is convenience sampling? Convenience sampling is the opposite of random sampling. The basic principle of doing statistical research or statistical analysis in a research is that, but that too particularly quantitative research, that the study will be based on a random sample. It is not only the number, the number should be randomly assigned. So if you say that in order to study the first year postgraduate students of UCMS for their smoking behavior, out of the 160 admitted students, I need a sample size of 60. Now, how do you pick up these 60? The ideal method is that this 60 should be picked up randomly. Why they should be picked up randomly? Because if you pick them up randomly, then you can say that each of those 160 admitted students had equal opportunity of being selected in the study. I'm going to select 60 only, but the 60, who are those 60 being picked up? That will be decided absolutely in a random manner without any bias. Okay, so that is random sample. Now, you are saying that this is a sensitive issue. Suppose forget about smoking, you can find a random sample. Suppose you are interested in knowing high risk sexual behavior of the first year postgraduate students. Now that's a sensitive area where half or even say more than 60% of the students may not be comfortable in participating in your research. So what will you say? You'll say it's very difficult, though it's an interesting topic. We may be interested in doing this research, but random sample is not possible because more than half of the people are going to refuse to participate. And if that happens, then what will you do? You will try to convince your friends, people you know, and people who are, if I use the term, liberal enough to talk about their sexual life with a researcher. And you find that only hardly 55% out of that 160 are ready to do it. Now, these are not randomly selected. Only those 55 who thought were going to answer this question you approach, that becomes a convenience sample. So in convenience sampling, you cannot do a random sampling, and since you cannot do a random sampling, sample size estimation is not required. But there is a caveat here. The caveat is, if you are doing a pilot study, if you are doing a descriptive statistics based study, and if you are using convenience sample, you are not going to apply any statistical test of significance. The data will remain only descriptive. Okay, now you say I did a convenience sample and I could find 60. My original calculated sample size was 60. 60 is achieved. Now I'm going to do t-test and chi-square test. No, because it's a convenience sample, because it is not a random sample, you should not apply t-test or chi-square, or for that matter, any test of significance. Right. So these are the, for a PG student, these are the escape areas. If you want to avoid calculating a sample size, do a pilot study, admit that you are doing convenience sampling, or you say I'm going to just present my data as a descriptive statistics. I'm not going to do any statistical analysis on that. And you are on the safe side. Nobody can question your protocol in that scenario. And second, I said qualitative research. In qualitative research, sorry, Vivek is saying I can see, hear you live, but your screen is not visible. What are you seeing on the screen, Vivek Kumar? Vivek, I've unmuted you. Can you come online? Can you unmute yourself? Yes, Vivek, I can hear you. Please tell me what's the problem. Please speak in your mic, Vivek. I'm not able to hear you. Vivek, can you talk? Your mic is on. Do you want to say something, Vivek? Okay. Okay, thank you. If it's sorted out, fine. Right. So qualitative research usually is done on a very few people. If you're doing in-depth interview, if you're doing focus group discussion, or say you're doing a genetic study. In genetic study, we know we don't have resources to carry out study on thousands of people because or your kit, your diagnostic or analytical kit that you're going to use is very expensive. So you cannot do on a large number. So you say you are doing a qualitative research. Finally, some of you may be familiar with these terms, meta-analysis and systematic reviews. Meta-analysis and systematic reviews are basically third degree research or third level research. Primary research, you collect data, you analyze the data. That is primary research. Secondary research, somebody else has collected the data, you analyze that data, that is secondary research. And third level is meta-analysis, that is people have collected data, they have published their research, you are compiling the research that people have already published, and you are using those published articles to arrive at a conclusion from large number of studies. That is a part of meta-analysis and systematic reviews. In systematic reviews and meta-analysis, you need not calculate a sample size, because as many studies you find, you have to include them. There's no alternative. If they meet your inclusion criteria, and if you're doing a meta-analysis, if there are 700 published papers which meet your inclusion criteria, you have to include all 700. You cannot say that out of 700, I'll pick up only 50 or I'll pick up 100. No, you have to include all 700. If you are doing a systematic review, then all published articles must be reviewed in that. So these are the conditions where sample size calculation is not required or not possible. Yes. बोलो. हो गया कि नहीं हुआ? नहीं हुआ ना? क्या प्रॉब्लम आ रहा है? उसमें एक्सपी लोड कर सकते हो तो देखो. हाँ हाँ, हटा दो. डेटा का बैकअप ले लो. डेटा का बैकअप लेके उसको सिस्टम हटा के एक्सपी लोड कर दो. तो तुम उसको फॉर्मेट कर दो. मुझे डेटा नहीं चाहिए उसमें से कुछ. हाँ, हार्ड डिस्क को फॉर्मेट कर दो. Sorry about these interruptions. That is the problem in online classes. Since you are not in a classroom, people will keep barging into your office. Sorry about that. Or they will keep making phone calls. Okay. So meta-analysis and systematic reviews, I said, is another condition where sample size calculation is not required. Okay. Okay. Niharika Dwivedi wants to know what is the difference between meta-analysis and systematic review. In brief, systematic review means, suppose you have come across 40 articles on a particular topic. You read all 40 articles and summarize what those 40 research published articles are saying in a narrative. That is a systematic review. What is meta-analysis? The data that has been used in these 40 research studies, you are going to pool all the data of all those 40 studies and come out with your own results. That's a meta-analysis. So meta-analysis is a quantitative process where you include the data of every study and churn them and come out with a new result, which is an amalgamation of all mathematical processes followed in calculating the value. To give you an example, we calculate odds ratio. Suppose you want to calculate the odds ratio of effect of particulate matter size 2.5 in triggering acute exacerbation of COPD. And one study says the odds ratio is 2.5. That means people who have been exposed to high level of PM 2.5 are 2.5 times at a greater risk of developing acute exacerbation of COPD. Another study says no, the odds ratio is 1.005 only. Another study says the odds ratio is 4. Another study says the odds ratio is 1.8. That means several studies are reporting several odds ratios. Now, what actually in meta-analysis you do, suppose one study had a sample size of 800, another had a sample size of 50 only, another had a sample size of 150, so on and so forth. So now, if you have original data, you will pool all this data. So there are 10 studies and the total pooled data of 10 studies amounts to 4,000 population. And now with this 4,000 people, you will calculate a fresh odds ratio. This odds ratio is a sum up or summary of all the odds ratios reported by other studies. That is meta-analysis. That is pooling data of existing research and coming out with a new value of the parameter that you are trying to check. In systematic review, you are not doing anything like that. You just read those 40 articles and you describe what are the findings of those 40 published articles with respect to relationship between PM 2.5 exposure and acute exacerbation of COPD. Is that clear? That's what meta-analysis and systematic reviews are. Right. Now, how are you going to write in your protocol? Your key question is how to write about the sample size in your protocol. So, what you need to do is, it is extremely important to have a paragraph on sample size under methodology and explain the sample size status of your research work. So what are the scenarios? Number one scenario, did you need to calculate a sample size? If yes, how did you do it and what was the sample size? If you did not need to calculate a sample size, why? Why you do not require to calculate a sample size, you have to explain. And those criteria or those conditions where we need not calculate a sample size, whichever is fitting into that, you need to mention that in that paragraph. Okay. So, and how to write it, I'll give you an example how to write a sample size at the end of the lecture. But this is all I want to tell you about sample size. I'll again stop. If you have a question related to sample size part, you can ask now. I don't see anyone raising a hand, anyone asking a question. So if that is so, I can move on. So great, no question at this stage, fine. Now we move on to the second component in your protocol that you are going to write about what to write about the statistical analysis. So what to write about the statistical analysis? Statistical analysis consists of these parts. Primary outcome. What is the primary outcome? When you write your protocol, you must have framed a research question and you must have been told that the research question is answered with the help of objectives you set for your study. So objectives of study are categorized as primary objective and secondary objectives. Usually we have one or two primary objectives, and if there are more associated or allied questions that you want to answer, then you have a secondary objective added to that. So the research question, the primary objective is answered by the variable which answers your primary objective is your primary outcome. So you need to specify what is the primary outcome. If you say that I want to study whether the combination therapy of steroid and ivermectin and say one antiviral drug for COVID-19, together the three are going to be are going to improve the mortality rate among severely ill COVID-19 patients. So what is the primary outcome? The mortality rate. Mortality rate among the patients who have been given this triple drug therapy of antiviral, steroid, and say any other drug vis-a-vis the standard care of treatment. So primary outcome will tell you what is the change in the mortality of the intervention arm in which you have given the trial set of drugs. And then your secondary objective is to determine what are the factors which may influence the outcome of this new drug trial that I am doing with this triple combination therapy for COVID-19. And you say it may be dependent on the age of the patient, it may be dependent on the comorbidities present, it may depend on the duration of illness prior to starting therapy, and so on and so forth. So there may be 5 factors which may be influencing the outcome, and you want to show the result in terms of individual outcome with respect to individual patient group. So what is the mortality in those who have comorbidity? What is the mortality in those who were admitted at least 7 days after onset of the symptoms? What is the level of mortality in this group of patients who were say for example having COPD in the past, like that? So these are ancillary questions you want to answer, so they become your secondary outcome. So you must, in statistical analysis, you must specify what is the primary outcome of your research. And primary outcome of your research actually comes from the dependent variable in the research. Dependent variable means which measures the outcome, and independent variable means those variables which influence the outcome. So dependent variable here is the mortality rate. We are assuming, the hypothesis is that this new triple drug regime is going to improve the mortality. Survival rate is going to improve. So your primary outcome is survival. What is the dependent variable? Survived or the patient died. So the dependent variable intervention trial, we are talking about a randomized control clinical trial. So these are my independent variables. So I have to specify what is my dependent variable, what are my independent variables. Okay. After having done, Akanksha is saying my voice is not audible. Voice is breaking. Wait. I'm using computer audio. Okay. Testing. Hello, check. Is the voice audible now? My computer shows that the voice is audible. Okay, fine. So, what did you miss out? Was it cracking or the voice was lost altogether? Akanksha, if you can answer. Did you miss out on something? Should I need to repeat or I just go ahead? Dependent and independent variables. Okay. So the dependent variable is the primary outcome. As in COVID-19 example I was saying, what is the outcome? Whether at the end of the treatment, patient is going to die or patient is going to survive the disease. So that is my dependent variable. That is my primary outcome variable. What are the independent variables here? Variables which are influencing the outcome. Whether the patient will survive or not will depend on whether the patient has been put on the trial drug or which has been put on a conventional treatment regime. So this trial drug or conventional treatment is an independent variable. And the relationship is influenced by the age of the patient. So age becomes an independent variable. The relationship depends on existing comorbidities. If the person has diabetes, hypertension, any malignancy, HIV, immunosuppressed condition, these are my independent variables. Or it may also depend on duration of illness prior to onset of treatment. So that duration of treatment, a duration of illness prior to treatment becomes an independent variable. Okay, so the dependent is the outcome that we are looking at, and independent are those variables which are influencing the outcome. Got it? So we have to write in our protocol, we have to write what is or what are the dependent variables and also what are the independent variables. Now, after that, in statistical analysis, you also have to write how are you going to manage your data. I'm assuming that all of you are going to do quantitative research. So you will be selecting 50 patients or 100 patients or 200 patients, and you will collect some information on those patients. Conventionally, we develop a questionnaire or a proforma on which we collect all informations pertaining to a particular patient. Okay. Priya and Divya are saying that the dependent variable is still not clear. Okay, Divya, I don't, yes. Divya, I have unmuted you. Can you please come online and ask your question? Unmute yourself and then let's talk about it. Divya, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Sir, I had asked that doubt when your voice was inaudible. After you cleared it, it's understood now,
Okay,
sir.
okay. Now it's clear. What's a dependent and independent variable?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Right. So after describing the outcomes and the dependent and independent variable, you have to write how are you going to manage your data. So you are collecting data either on a questionnaire or nowadays we collect data directly on a computer system also. We have online method of data collection. You can use a tablet or your smartphone and you enter the information about the patient on the tablet or the smartphone app that you are going to use for data collection. But this data of individual patient either present on a written piece of paper or it is present in the form of a questionnaire which has been filled online. For example, You might have participated in some Google surveys. Google Forms are developed in which the form is digitally given to you. You are asked 10 questions and you answer those questions and that form goes away. So that is actually a tool of data collection which is digital in nature. The same question could have been given to you on a printed piece of paper and answers could have been given. Now, if you have got information about these 100 patients or 200 patients, whatever is your sample size, you need to compile all this information in a digital spreadsheet. A digital spreadsheet is most commonly used digital spreadsheet is an Excel sheet. I'm sure you must have had experience of working with MS Excel, which is a part of the MS Office software. Okay, so in MS Office software, you have MS Excel, and this Excel is a row by column sheet. I'm sure most of you have seen it, but just for making you look at it, let me show you what does it look like, an Excel sheet. Okay, I'll show you later. At the end of the class, I'll show you what does an Excel sheet look like. So we were talking about data management. So in the Excel spreadsheet is the most convenient part where you enter the information about every patient. All variables are entered column wise and each patient is assigned a row. So this is something divided into rows and columns. And the intersection of the rows and columns is a cell. And one cell connects one piece of information about one patient. So your patient number 10, if you write the name of the patient, this is one information. This is recorded in one cell. If you want to write the age of the patient, how old he is, say 40 years, so this number 40 will occupy a cell. So this way, across a row, the information about one particular patient goes. And across the column, information about one variable goes. How does it go? I'll show you later on. Just keep that in mind. Okay, after that, next step is once you have entered the data into Excel spreadsheet, you need to clean the data. So you'll say data entry is being done using Excel spreadsheet, or all collected data will be converted into a digital spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet I'm going to use is MS Excel. That's what you have to write. After that, what will you do? After that, you will check the data for the correctness of the entry. This process is called data cleaning. Suppose wrongly a female patient has been identified as a male, or while keying the numbers, the age of a person which is 40 has been typed as 90. If that happens, then those becomes extreme values or undesirable values. So you need to correct that. Data cleaning means all incorrect entries must be checked and corrected. Now you will say, if I've entered data on 500 patients, am I supposed to check it the entire thing again? Unfortunately, the answer is yes, but there are shortcut methods also of doing that. That is, you run frequency tables. Now, don't ask me how to run frequency tables at this stage, but there are methods by which, suppose you have data on 500 patients. So you have written the age of the patient. So there's a command by which you can run the frequency, and you find your study has actually been on a targeted population of people between say 30 and 50 year age. That your youngest patient will be 30-year-old and your oldest patient is 50-year-old. But when we actually ran the frequency table, you found there are 10 patients whose age has been reported as below 30. And there are 3 patients whose age has been reported above 50. So you know these are wrong entries and you can immediately go back and correct them. So there are various methods by which wrong entries can be identified and they need to be corrected, because if you don't correct them, you'll be dealing with wrong data. And if you continue to deal with wrong data, then you are going to be in trouble. Right? So that's why cleaning of the data, having all data corrected is very important. So you say that after data entry, we are going to clean the data. And then you have to say data security. From ethical point of view, from legal point of view, it's very important that the data collected about individual persons are kept confidential, kept secret, and the privacy of the patient is maintained. There's a risk of data being stolen. On a sensitive disease or sensitive information, data may be stolen. So how are you going to keep the data secure? You have to mention that you will keep your Excel file password protected, and You will not allow anybody else who is not interested in, who is not involved in your research to have access to the data that you have compiled. You have to give a statement like this, that confidentiality and secrecy of the data will be maintained. Privacy of the patient will not be compromised at any stage. And suitable password protection will be provided to prevent any stealing of the data. Okay. And then after data security, data backup. Never trust your computer. Your computer can crash anytime. Your computer can fail to log in, fail to start anytime. Don't trust this machine. So your all hard work will be lost unless you keep a backup. Okay. So you mentioned that a backup of the data will always be maintained, so that in case the data is lost primarily, I have a backup or either on a hard disk or on a pen drive or any other backup device or on a cloud. You can keep your data backed up so that you can retrieve the data if your computer has crashed, your hard disk has crashed, and the data retrieval is not possible from there. Okay. Now, then you write after data management, in the steps we said after data management achieving digital spreadsheet, data cleaning, and data security. Then you are going to do two types of analysis. One is exploratory data analysis, looking at the picture that has been created by that data. How many patients are male? How many patients are female? What is the average age of my case group? What is the average age of my control group? On an average, if it is about smoking, on an average, how many cigarettes my patients are smoking, how many cigarettes my control are smoking, like that. These are descriptive statistics. And descriptive statistics is different in quantitative variable and qualitative variable. Let me emphasize one point here. Quantitative and qualitative research is a different thing, which we talked in the beginning. Quantitative and qualitative variables are a different thing. A quantitative variable is a measurable variable. When you write the age of a patient, when you write the hemoglobin quantity in the blood, when you write the length of the femur bone, when you write the systolic and diastolic blood pressure, these are quantitative variables. Quantitative variables are expressed with central tendencies and dispersions. Central tendencies are mean, median, and mode. Dispersions are standard deviation, standard error, interquartile range. So quantitative variables will be expressed as mean, median, or mode, whichever is most appropriate for that particular variable. And by dispersion, either a standard deviation or a standard error or 95% confidence interval or the interquartile range. That is how you are going to give the descriptive statistics of your quantitative variable. Qualitative variables are proportions. What proportion of my patients were male? I had 35% male, 65% female patients. What was the frequency distribution? How many were illiterate? How many were school educated? How many were college educated? Okay. How many had severe illness? How many had moderate illness? How many had mild illness? What proportion actually survived? What proportion died? These are qualitative variables. So you write them as frequency tables or as proportions, as I just said, or you make contingency tables of rows and columns when the categories are more than 2. So that is descriptive statistics. And finally, you have to write what is the inferential statistics that you have. That right, what are the conclusions you are going to draw on the basis of data. And that inferential data analysis is primarily hypothesis testing or quantitative statement of your research question. So here you will write which test of significance you are going to use. And please do not write that you will be using appropriate test of significance. There is nothing called appropriate test of significance. As a researcher, you must know which particular test of significance you are going to apply. The particular test of significance is depending on what analysis you are doing. It may be a chi-square test, it may be a t-test, it can be a z test, it can be a test of proportions. Okay, these are the tests of significance that are commonly applied. Or you might be doing a regression analysis. So you say that a regression equation will be generated or a model will be created using linear regression or logistic regression or Poisson regression, whatever regression tool you are going to use. But what tool you are going to use, that you must first consult with your guide as well as statistician. Here I want to tell you something of the track. When you are I'll not say struggling, when you are actually compiling your protocol and you are going to write that what statistical analysis you are going to perform and what sample size you need to take. There are two ways. If you know how to do it yourself. That is the best way. If you do not know how to do it, if you need the help of a statistician, then your college, Department of Biostatistics and Medical Informatics, gives you the services for getting your sample size calculated and helping you design the statistical analysis of your data. For that, there are two persons. Unfortunately, only two persons are available in the department at this moment. One is Dr. A.K. Bansal. He is a statistician. He sits in room number 402 on the 4th floor of college building. And the second person is Dr. Arun Sharma, who is in front of your screen. He sits in room number 302 on the 3rd floor in the college building. These two persons are there who can help you in your sample size calculation and writing how the statistical analysis is to be done. In case you want to come to me, then you have to come with your supervisor. I will not entertain you alone. You have to come with your supervisor. Why? Because you are the first year student. You are going to start research. Since you are going to start research, the intricacies of statistical analysis are not well known to you. So whatever I want to explain to you, you will not comprehend that. And your guide, your supervisor, is a hugely experienced, learned researcher who understands these intricacies. You have come to learn. So when both of you come together, it makes our lives easier to tell you that what statistical analysis is possible and what sample size should appropriately be calculated. And the same thing applies. It will be appreciated if you go along with your supervisor to Dr. Bansal also. The choice is yours. It's absolutely free wherever you want to. Free in terms of freedom of choice. I'm not talking of any monetary thing here, right? Sorry for saying that, but yeah, you have a freedom of choice. You can go to either of us and get your work done or get your analysis designed, help in analysis design and help in calculating samples. Right? Okay. This is all I have to say about the topic of what to write in a protocol under the heading of sample size and what to write in under the heading of statistical analysis. Okay. Before you ask questions, you can prepare your questions. You can start typing your questions. I want to run you through two examples. So here is a study. The title of the study is Lung Functions and Effect of Air Pollution on it among male college students in Delhi. This is the title of the study. They needed to calculate a sample size and how it was calculated, how it is reported in the protocol. Sample size is calculated using the Cochrane's formula. The formula which we use for calculating the sample size is given there, and each alphabet used in the formula is explained here. So what is Z here, what is P, what is Q, what is D is mentioned there. So this is the formula that you are going to use for calculating sample size. Now, you may not actually use a formula for calculating sample size. You can directly enter these values on a sample size calculating software. There are several free software available now online to calculate sample size. One of them, which I use commonly, is called P&S. P&S means power and sample size. If in the Google you go and type P&S sample size software, it will give you the software. You download the software, you install in them on your machine, you read how to run it, and you can calculate your sample size on your own, provided you know the values that you have to put in for Z, P, Q, and D in this particular formula. For other, this is for a descriptive study. For other type of study, there may be a different formula to be used. Okay. Then, once the sample size formula is mentioned, then you write about the sampling. They want to detect proportion. So in this particular study, there were two components. First component was to detect proportion of population who have below normal lung function. And the second is to establish effect of pollution in those with decreasing pulmonary function. Second part is the case control design. So for this, sample size has to be calculated based on odds ratio of risk factors included in the study. So we needed to calculate two sample sizes, one for proportion detection and other is for odds ratio detection. So now you have to write, in the absence of any data, assuming the prevalence. See, in this formula we needed P. P was the prevalence. So since no P was available, we assumed a prevalence of P, and Q is 1 minus P. The confidence interval of 95%. Confidence interval means this Z value for 95% confidence interval. And third, the permissible error D of 10%. So that means this D, desired level of precision or permissible error, margin of error, that was allowed to be 10%. Margin of error 10% means that of 50% we can deviate on either side 10%. 10% of 50% is actually 5%. So I want to detect a prevalence which is likely to lie between 45% and 55%. That means plus minus 5% absolute error or plus minus 10% relative error. The sample size would be applied separately to two different group of studies about this. The second part I am ignoring, we did not need that. What are you going to write in the statistical analysis? Data collected will be entered into MS Excel spreadsheet and would be analyzed with SPSS 20.0 software. Data will be cleaned and errors will be corrected. Simple descriptive tabulations will be used. This is my data cleaning as well as my data descriptive analysis. Exploratory data analysis will be performed to determine distribution of different variables. Test of significance like chi-square test, t-test, ANOVA, linear and logistic regression will be used depending on the nature of the variable. We did not write appropriate test of significance will be applied. In case of non-normally distributed data, if any, non-parametric test of significance will be used. So this is what we said in statistical analysis. The data confidentiality part I could not capture here because that was written in a separate paragraph. But please remember that is a deficiency here. You must maintain about the data confidentiality and secrecy also. You must write here. Another study. The aim of the study is to determine access to healthcare and its determinants among poorest of the poor slum dwellers. So we had one primary objective and two secondary objectives. Primary objective is to determine the access of healthcare. Secondary objective is to determine the role of spatial determinants and socio-demographic determinants. Let's not go into that detail. Again, we write the sample size calculation. To the best of our knowledge, there has been no study in India to determine the utilization rate. So here, a priori data is not available. But we found, in a published literature, we found utilization rate of government healthcare facility was 23%. So we used that 23%. So what did we say? To estimate the utilization rate, assuming the value of 23% as valid with a relative precision of 20% of the utilization rate, and the population in which we'll collect this data from is 24,831. The required sample size at 95% confidence interval of for using simple random sampling technique is 320. That's all you have to know how to write the sample size. And in data management, again we said data collected in questionnaire will be transferred to MS Excel spreadsheet, geocoded, and geocoded because it was a geographic information system based study. And we told what are the outcome variable and what are the different data analysis components that we are going to use. We need to write that in our protocol, right? So these are the two examples I gave you. I gave you the profile, what you are supposed to write in sample size, what you are supposed to write in your statistical analysis. That's all from my side. Now you have about 5 minutes time. If you have any questions, you can ask. Okay, so the first question is from Vivek. Vivek wants to know, is only one test of significance used in a study or different tests will be used? Of course, different tests are used depending on the data. Say, in the same data set, you have a quantitative variable and you have a qualitative variable. So for quantitative variable, you are going to use t-test. For a qualitative variable, you are going to use chi-square test. And you have multiple variables, then you are going to use regression. If your outcome variable is a continuous variable, you are using a linear regression. Your outcome variable is a categorical variable. You are using logistic regression. So it will always be a combination of tests. It is not only one test. Okay. Samit wants to know, in the absence of data, we consider prevalence as 50%. But if we have few studies with wide range of prevalence, then how to choose the prevalence? Excellent question. When we have wide range of prevalence from different studies, usually, as a rule of thumb, the higher the prevalence, the smaller the sample size. The lower the prevalence, the larger the sample size. So to be on the safe side, if you have a wide range of prevalence, ideally, you should use the lowest prevalence to calculate the sample size, because lowest prevalence will give you the highest sample size, and automatically the highest sample size will cover the higher prevalence sample sizes. So you get the best sample size with the lowest reported prevalence. Right. Any other question? You have 30 seconds time to type your question or raise your hand. Let me see if there are any. Otherwise, we'll close the class. Okay, so there are no raised hands, there are no typed questions. So the class is completed. Thank you very much for participating, for listening, and I wish you great success with your postgraduate program as well as your thesis writing and protocol writing. Thank you. I'm closing the class. That's all I have to from this side.